Welcome to Where Are They Now? We reach into the archives of Lenape, Shawnee, Cherokee, and Seneca high schools and invite selected alumni to share memories and fill us in on their career paths after commencement. Since Lenape's first graduating class in 1961, Shawnee's in 1972, Cherokee's in 1978, and Seneca's in 2005, over 72,000 individuals have received diplomas from these four schools. Hello and welcome to Where Are They Now? I'm Mark Sonsini, a 1996 graduate of Cherokee High School, and today we'll be talking with a Seneca graduate from the class of 2010. He's a staff writer and columnist for The Athletic, covering the National Football League and the New York Jets, and lives in Lawrence, New Jersey. I'd like to welcome Connor Hughes to the show. Connor?
Hey.
Welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Good to see you here again. Excited to hear about your career covering the NFL in New York, but first let's go back to your time in this area and at Seneca High School. You grew up in Tabernacle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm an OMS kid. I'm a full Tabernacle kid, so I went to Tabernacle Elementary School, Olson Middle School, eventually came here to Seneca, and then I even kind of stuck a little bit local too for college, going to Burlington County College and then transferring into Monmouth University. So I'm a Jersey kid. I haven't left. I have no reason to want to leave, so I think I'm going to be in this area for quite a bit.
Terrific. And a couple siblings that went to Seneca as well?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, Taylor and Madison Hughes, both of them. And it was the same career path, or not career path, but same educational pathway. They went to Tabernacle Elementary School, Olson, then back up to Seneca. Okay. They're both still local as well, staying in Jersey, and they went the educational route. They're both teachers. Madison's in special education, and Taylor is an art teacher.
So let's talk about Seneca. A couple of the teachers that had a big impact on you. One, two of them were in the technology department.
Yeah.
First one being Kirk Seeley.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the cool thing is that, and you guys were huge with it as well, is that my career went the broadcasting journalism route. And what I think was awesome about this district, more so than anything else, and everywhere that I've gone and talked to kids, whether it was at BCC or whether it was at Monmouth or even now, today in this field, what they all find crazy is the opportunities that this district presented in terms of GETV, which was, with the morning show that they had there, LDTV here with you guys, which for me, and sports, which was such a huge part of my life, getting a chance to do the play-by-play there. Sure. But I mean, my career kind of got a start largely because of Kirk Seeley. I mean, I remember my freshman year at Seneca High School, which was so long ago. I walked in because I was involved in like all the TV tech classes there. I think they're communications tech is what they call them now. Right. But I walked in and the studio in Seneca, there's like a back room where all the control panels are, and that's where I used to do the morning show. And I remember walking there, and on the top left TV was a game broadcast playing. And like I said, I'm a sports guy. So for me, it was, as soon as there's sports, it's like I lock in. Right. And I looked up, I was like, oh, it's a game broadcast. And I was like, oh, it looked like there was the bottom with the scoreboard, there was the clock ticking down, there was I mean, it was a sports broadcast. It wasn't like a project. It looked like a professional broadcast. And then I was like, oh, I wonder what game it is, because it didn't look, it was like a night game. I was like, that doesn't look like the Sunday night game I just watched, and I forget when this was. So I looked at it, I was like, holy cow, it's Seneca. Like, Seneca was the team that was playing, and I forget who they were playing. It was Cherry Hill East, whatever it was. And I looked at it, and I looked at Seeley, I was like, Seeley, what is that? And that's when he explained. He goes, that's LDTV. I said to him, I was like, well, how do I do that? I was like, I want to do play-by-play. How do I do it? I want to be that guy. How do I do it? And he goes, well, you asked. He goes, and the guys that are there, they're both graduating. And so I think it was that was my introduction to, if Seeley doesn't say like, well, that's what they say. I mean, I don't have that. And then I think Mr. Conowitz was the teacher at that time with Seeley. Like those two guys ran the communications department. That's when Shaniqua Brown came in, and I was much more heavily involved with her throughout my sophomore through senior years in that TV tech department. But Seeley, I'll always owe something to him, because it was literally just a kid walking into the back room, seeing an LDTV broadcast up on the screen, saying, what the heck is that? And then the next year was when I started doing play-by-play for you guys, and I did it from my sophomore year through my senior year. And when I went to BCC, I was instantly named their color commentator for their high school football broadcast, which they took super seriously at the time. And I got that because of my clips from LDTV. I mean, I don't get that. I jumped kids that were there 2 years before me, and it was because of my clips at LDTV.
Yeah, they probably don't see a lot of kids with the type of experience that you had.
No, but
calling
even like
games.
this opportunity, like they don't have this. Like this is like like I said, man. I've been to BCC, I've been to Monmouth University, and I've now worked in the New York market in both journalism and broadcasting. And the kids that I talk to that reach out to me that say like, hey, I'm interested in doing this, I'm interested in doing that. First thing I tell them is get involved, and I tell them about this, and they're all amazed. Like they don't. This doesn't exist everywhere, and the places that it does, some kids just don't take advantage of it. But if you want to make it in this field, you got to take advantage of it, and this is one way to do it.
Well, you definitely have done that, and a couple other teachers that had a lot of information and guidance for you that you took advantage of. One was Renee Collins.
Now Collins.
marketing.
I knew her as Hamps. Yeah, she was in sports marketing. I think she was one of the first people that kind of introduced to me, and I still go back every year to talk to her classes. That there was sports careers outside of playing, because when I was a kid, I loved, like I said, I love sports, and I realized pretty early though that when I was at my little league team and kids were bigger than me, stronger than me, faster than me, and could jump higher, I'm probably not going to the NFL, and I'm certainly not going to. I couldn't throw as fast to go to baseball, and basketball I can't jump, so that wasn't going to happen either. So she was one of the first people that kind of showed to me that there are other avenues after it. And she didn't teach journalism, like she wasn't a journalism or broadcasting, as I learned all that from you guys and other teachers as well. But she was one of the first people to say, these are sports-related careers where you are heavily involved in sports outside of playing it. And I was like, man, if I could do something like that, that's what I wanted to do. And play-by-play was kind of my first love. Journalism came in late, and they were important. And so was Jennifer Wolfson, who was my a teacher I had my sophomore year, my English teacher, who when I was a little immature at that time, so she stuck with me. But she was amazing. I still have a great relationship with her today. I see her every time I go back to Seneca. I make a point to go over and talk to Wolfson. She was super heavily involved in my high school career. Certainly helped with motivation and keeping me in line, and was always kind of a voice too. Like when you kind of get out of your way and you kind of got to come back down and mature, and she was one of those people you could go to and talk to. So those teachers were all at my time at Seneca. I mean, I owe a lot to them.
Was it that English class that kind of opened the door to you for writing and kind of said,
that's
this
actually,
might be something I want to do?
That's the crazy thing, man, is that writing to me was always something that I enjoyed. It was always something that I liked. It was always something that I was pretty good at, but it was never something that I thought of as a career.
Okay.
Because what I wanted to do and what I love, and it's pretty obvious, I love talking. It's like I got in trouble with it all the time in Seneca was talking. I was voted most talkative at Olson Middle School. Like, I love talking. And I love talking as much as I love sports. So I remember what I used to do when I was a kid is play-by-play was what I wanted. That is what I wanted to do as my career. And I would turn off the audio on my Madden video game, and I would do play-by-play when I was a kid. I came here, I did it for LDTV. I started BCC, and I was doing it for them. And it was like, I wanted to be the play-by-play guy. And that was it. I wanted to be the play-by-play guy. I thought it was so fun. The thought of that being a career and a life was like it for me.
Yeah.
And of all things, my first semester at Burlington County College, you got to take prerequisites. So history was one of the prerequisites.
Sure.
History 102. And Robert Koval was the professor. The first day of class separated us all into study groups. And he separated us all into study groups based on our major. So when you want to go into whatever avenue you want to go into broadcasting, you're always communications. And then in that cluster of communications, there's a billion different things you can go into. So for me, I was a communications broadcast guy. So he put us into study groups, and at the end of class, he then went around to each of us and said, like, okay, what's your major name? What do you want to do? And he got to me, and I said, hey, my name's Connor. I'm a communications major. I want to be a play-by-play guy. And he goes, that's unique. That's cool. You better learn to write. And then instantly went to the next kid. And he said it to me, and I was like,
writing?
Dude didn't hear me right. Like, I didn't say writing. I said I want to be a broadcaster. So after class, I went up to him, and I was like, hey, man, I was like, you didn't hear me. I want to be a play-by-play. Why'd you say learn to write? And he laughed at me, and it's crazy. And I'm telling you, I am not where I am today if he doesn't say this sentence. He goes, go home today. He goes, and I'll give you extra credit if you can find me one play-by-play broadcaster that doesn't have some background in writing, whether it's journalism, newspaper, wrote for a school paper, did PR releases, all that stuff. And I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and I knew extra credit in history would be killer at this point. I was like, easy way to boost the GPA. So I went home that day and I spent an hour, 2 hours researching my favorite broadcasters, Mike Breen, Bob Papa, Joe Buck, all these guys, trying to find someone that just made it. And I really couldn't find too many of them. So that next day I said, you know what? Let's kick this, let's dabble in some writing. And at the time I was already doing play-by-play for Z88.9, the BCC's radio station, now RCBC, their radio station. I was already doing play-by-play and color commentary for their college basketball games, and they did high school broadcasts just like you guys do.
Right.
And so I was already at these games interviewing coaches, so I was like, I'll just try to start turning them into stories.
Sure.
And I started writing that way. The day after, actually, I talked to Professor Koval. I went down to the guidance office at BCC, and I said to my counselor, can you just sign me up for a journalistic writing class? When I got put into the class for the next semester, eventually they put the class list online, and the professor was the top. His name was Steve Royek. And so I got his email address, sent him an email, said, Professor, my name's Connor Hughes. I'm going to be in your class this semester. I don't have any experience writing, but it's something I kind of want to start to develop that trait. I'm currently broadcasting. I've written these stories off of games.
Right.
Can you help me get better? And of all the people that have put forth means to help me, and there have been tons of you don't get anywhere in life without people helping you.
Sure.
What Professor Royek did for me was top of the line, unbelievable. I mean, after every single one of those classes that I had throughout that entire semester, 45 minutes to an hour, he would sit with me after class, and we would take whatever I wrote that week, and we would destroy it. I mean, we would rip it up. We would change this, we would change that, we would change this, and then the next day I'd be like, all right, I see what you mean here. I'm going to go back. I'm going to write another story. I'm going to take it back. And then we would tear apart that thing. We would adjust lead, over wording, sentence structure.
And these weren't assignments.
No, these were just
extra
extra things I was doing on the side. Where I was at these games, I was like, I'm already broadcasting. Why don't I just write to develop this trait? The crazy thing about writing, and this is truly where I just fell in love with it, was when I would broadcast and do play-by-play, and you have to work. It's no different. You have to work. You have to try to get better.
Sure.
But like I would work on something, and it would be like a couple weeks, a couple months, and then finally it'd be like, okay, now I got it. Like it was a lot to get there. With writing, it all sort of started to come naturally. Like I didn't know half of what he was telling me, but once he would tell me it, it just stuck.
Made sense.
And it would be like, I got it. And there was no like, it was like, you told me that, I got it, now let's roll. Like now, and then it's the next thing I learned something else, and it's just all adding. And then what just I fell in love with was that how the smallest changes in writing can make the biggest difference, whether it's using this sentence structure instead of this one, or this type of a lead instead of this one. When you go for the punch, when you go for the scene setter, when you try to really describe every aspect of a room compared to when you just, if that's overwriting, you gotta take it back. All the different ways that you can construct a story to evoke emotion, whether it's you're writing something, I remember writing a story about a Jets linebacker, this was years later, but Jets linebacker Darren Lee, former linebacker, now he plays for the Chiefs, won the Super Bowl, who had a relationship with a 6-year-old kid who beat cancer. And writing that story and going and talking to his mom and like writing a story that hearing from people that I don't know that reach out and say, Connor, the story made me cry. To like evoke that kind of emotion. Mm-hmm. Or if you're writing a column, evoking anger. And it's like you can evoke like this just emotion that you can get from someone out of my words and my writing and the different techniques and styles you can use. I just fell in love with it. And I started learning that in that class. And after class specifically with Royak, and I continue to go to him to this day if I write something that I like or that I don't like, I'll send it to him. And he really took me from someone who had never written anything to a point where at the end of that class, I wrote a story as an assignment for the class on Sean Doolittle, who is a Shawnee graduate, went to UVA, crazy story, just won the World Series with the Nationals, but he had a crazy story starting where he was drafted as a first baseman, converted to pitcher in like a month, went from single A all the way up to the majors and was starting, and then like the next year he's in the All-Star game. Close family friend, so I did a story on him, a big feature. And I remember giving it to Royak and having him look over it, and he said, Connor, this should be published. And I sent that to then the Burlington County Times and said, my name's Connor, looking for an internship, because I'd already been working in broadcasting at the time, been calling games for the Camden River Sharks as their play-by-play guy. I was like, hey, I'm looking for an internship. And he goes, I'll do you one better. He goes, I like it, I'll hire you. He goes, I'll make you a freelancer. And then that's kind of where my career started to totally change and
so
take off.
This is while you're still at BCC?
Yeah, my whole career, I started working professionally, getting paid for both broadcasting as a student worker at BCC, but then I started getting paid for my writing my second year at BCC. Was when the BCT hired me, and I worked all throughout college in writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get the River Sharks gig?
Z889 had a relationship with them, and they would basically carry the River Sharks games on Z889's airwaves. So at the time I was doing color commentary for Z889's football broadcasts. I was doing play-by-play for their basketball broadcast, and then came springtime in the River Sharks. I applied for it, I got it, and I was on a team of like 3 guys, and we rotated the play-by-play because there's a lot of games.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of where I started to realize that maybe, I started falling in love with writing then too, because I would write after the games about the River Sharks too, and it was just fun.
Did you feel like your writing, it helped improve your broadcasting, your play-by-play?
Yeah, it did, because I mean, every time you write, you inadvertently learn so much. Like you're doing research to then write, but then when you're writing, it just sticks differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, that, and also what that also showed me too was the first experience of being around a team every day, and you can just pull stuff out of your head. Like, I mean, it was like when we would do LDTV, right? I mean, like Seneca, I was a Seneca play-by-play guy, so there was a different team they played every single week.
Right.
And you're trying to learn different things while also being a student. It's just like you're trying to stick all that information in. But with the River Sharks, it was the summer. I was around the team every single day. That you just start to learn things and remember, like, oh yeah, well this guy two days ago hit a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 7th. You're like, so now when he's up to the bat, you go, Brian Bergamy had a great 2-run home run, and like you just kind of remember
to
pull. Especially what I learned there with the River Sharks was that how to use the information and when to use it. And you learn it in broadcasting, and you learn it in writing, and it all kind of comes together.
Right. Now, obviously, you're a big football fan.
Yeah.
And you did cover some baseball. Talk about your experience when you were at LDTV covering sports, and you're covering a lot of different sports. You're covering even sports that you may not know a lot about, like soccer,
like my first wrestling match.
Or wrestling.
That was an experience, man. I remember it was that experience of doing it all was actually really, I mean, I covered everything for you. I remember covering, obviously you have the big ones, baseball, football, basketball.
Sure.
But then I remember doing lacrosse. I'd never covered a lacrosse. I'd never field hockey. I'd never covered field or seen a field hockey game before. I'd never done any of that. Track was like the first time I'd know what track is. You run, right? I mean, that was my information on it. Then going and covering a track is like, oh wow, this is totally different.
Yeah.
And it benefited me more than anything else when I went to the Burlington County Times and I started freelancing, because they would ask me, have you ever covered this before? And so the way that the BCT worked as a freelancer and as freelancing works, is you get paid per story. So if you're not writing stories, you're not getting paid. And that's like, so you want to write as much as you can write. And I would do every Friday night, but there were all these, like every Friday night was football, every Saturday was football. So that was easy. That was too little money I was getting for those two. But there were all these other games. So I would say, like, I covered LDTV, I covered track, I covered this, I covered that. Why don't you throw me out there, like, see what I can't do? And it's a story, like, I'll learn. And I remember covering, I ended up becoming my first or second year with the BCT, I think first year, I was their boys track beat writer. That became my beat. First track thing I ever covered was with you guys, and I had no idea when I walked into that, and so I remembered things from that to carry through. And when I was at the Star Ledger covering high school, I covered wrestling. I was wrestling in the winter. That's what I did in addition to basketball. My first wrestling was the LDTV track, first with LDTV, and then the BCT really spanned me. I mean, I remember writing featured articles on a kid who was a fencer, like a kid who was fencing, a kid who was a weightlifter, like a professional or a competitive weightlifter. All that stuff, but it was, LDTV was the first place that I got the experience to the outside of those big 3 sports that everyone loves, getting that experience. And then when you're starting in journalism, you're not covering the Jets to kick off the bat. I mean, you're covering high school and you're learning everything, and that was huge for me. Super beneficial, absolutely.
Great. So then you transfer to Monmouth University.
Yep.
And you finish out there in broadcasting.
Yeah.
You won some awards there and some scholarships.
Yeah, that was really cool. I know the Raymond Award that I won there was, and there were a couple I won from the New Jersey Broadcasters Association, which were awards I won from submitting stories that I had written from the Burlington County Times, and then the Star Ledger when I was covering high school sports there as well. But the Raymond one was the one that kind of was the one that hit home the most, because with the New Jersey Broadcasters Association, I applied for them. Like, they were scholarships awards, so you apply. And the Raymond one, I didn't know it was happening. So the last week, a couple months of school, maybe the last 2 months of school, I got an email in my school inbox like, hey, you've received an award and you need to come to the award show like in 2 weeks. And I was like, I didn't apply. So I remember I went to my professor, my guidance counselor, I was like, hey man, like, I didn't apply for anything, so I think this was probably a mistake. It was a mistake email. And at the time, when I was at Monmouth, I was already working in the field. So I was working at the Star Ledger as a high school sports reporter, and I was, my first year at Monmouth, the tail end of my first year at Monmouth, I started covering the NFL. Second year and last year at Monmouth, I was covering the NFL my second year at Monmouth. So I wasn't super involved in Monmouth's student newspaper or Monmouth's broadcasting, because I was already
doing your own
out.
thing.
Yeah, I kind of couldn't do that because I was employed to do things elsewhere. Sure. So I was like, I'm not super involved with I was like, I think this was probably a mistake of an email. Like there's other C's, like you maybe just press on a button. And he goes, no, he goes, this is meant for you. And so what it was another scholarship award, but it was for excellence in broadcasting journalism. I think what the cool thing was that I had a professor who recognized it, saw it, and crazy as it wasn't even the professor I had a great relationship with. It was someone else who just had been aware of what I was doing without me talking about it.
Right.
And saw it, researched, looked into it, and then submitted my name for it, and I ended up winning it. And it was super. I ended up meeting. It was named after this guy's son, who, if I'm not mistaken, had some form of like a life-ending illness, and he had gone to Monmouth, and he had lived for a while, but then eventually, I don't know the specific illness off the top of my head. I can't totally remember, but it was his. I met his dad, who was still around. He goes, "I've heard your story, man." He goes, "It's pretty amazing what you're doing," and that's when it was. That one hit home, because it's different. Like it's one thing when you apply for something. It's another thing when your peers recognize something and say, you should look at this. That was really cool. That was awesome for me. I still have the award in my office. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So as you said, you're working.
Yeah.
While you're in school and finishing up.
Yeah.
And you're at Star Ledger at this point.
Sort of.
NJ.com?
Yeah, so when I was I worked at the Burlington County Times when I was at Burlington County College as a freelancer. When I graduated BCC and was going to Monmouth, I realized that it was going to be very hard to travel from where Monmouth is at the shore all the way 2 hours home, hour and a half home to cover high school sports for, it wasn't that great. It's a freelance gig.
Yeah.
So I was like, basically it's going to pay for my gas to go back and forth. But I was like, it'd be kind of cool. Like there's high schools up here. Like, is there a BCT up here?
Right.
And so Professor Royak, my professor who I had who really introduced me, we were talking about before, he said, I actually know a couple people at the Star Ledger. He goes, they have their high school department located up there. Let's make a couple calls. And he did. I went for an interview, and the Star Ledger hired me as a high school sports staff writer. So I was a part-time staff writer there for the Ledger for my first year at Monmouth, where I covered the Shore Conference originally. And I did that and then they moved me to Morris County because that was considered a bigger beat for them. So they moved me up to there.
And then after that is when you start getting into the NFL.
Yeah, that's when the NFL. So I had a friend, Joe Kania, who worked with me in that same high school department. And I said I covered wrestling for the Ledger. We were in Atlantic City for like the big, massive tournament that they do every year. We were down there and we were talking about what we want to do, because you're covering high school sports, but you're kind of saying like, well, what do I want to do moving forward here? Like, and I said, I want to be an NFL beat writer. And Joe said, he goes, it's kind of tough to be an NFL beat writer if you've never covered, it's tough to cover pro sports if you've never covered pro sports before. And I was like, that kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? Like that makes a little bit of sense to me. So the way that the Ledger worked at the time with our high school department was that you were off in the summer. So you covered high school sports throughout the school year, fall, summer, spring, but then summer hit and you were off. The summer in the NFL, there are events. There's OTAs, there's mini camp, there's training camp. So I was like, I'm in college, I just worked, I'm not doing anything right now. Why don't I look for an opportunity to try to get pro clips? And I wasn't ignorant. I knew that the New York Post, Daily News, like they weren't going to hire a 22, 23-year-old to come cover the team. But I figured that there would probably be fan sites out there that maybe I could just get pro clips. And I watch enough football. I was like, I just need to buy byline. I need my byline on a clip about the Giants, the Jets, the Eagles. It doesn't matter. Just so that when time comes to look for a job, I don't have to convince someone to say like, I can cover pro. I can show them clips and say, look, I already did it. Now let me do it full time. And so I found two outlets, SB Nation, who is Big Blue View. Ed Valentine was the editor, and Big Blue Interactive, who was run by Eric Kennedy. And I reached out to them both, sent them clips from high school. I said, do you guys mind if I start contributing? You don't have to pay me. I'm not looking for money. I just want my byline and contribute. And both those guys said yes. They said, absolutely, we'd love to have you on. And Eric, who at BBI, gave me a credential. So that gave me my opportunity to go to OTAs, minicamp, training camp, and not only just write from afar, but actually be in the thick of things and be next to the guy who's covering the Giants for ESPN and the New York Post and the Daily News and see how they're doing it and start not learning from a classroom, but real world, being in there, seeing how these guys ask questions, how these guys approach a press conference, and also go toe to toe and compete with them. Because in my opinion, I was like, they know that when they see a 22, 23-year-old kid, 21, at the time I think I was 21, walk in the locker room, they're going to think, oh, he's an autograph hound. They're like, he's looking like he's just a kid. He's like, oh my God, I'm around the Giants. That wasn't my opinion. I was there to get a job. And so I wanted to show them I could do everything they could do and do it just as well, and in some cases better. And that was my goal, was to go in there and grind and in some cases beat them. And it was tough, it was hard, I had to learn how to do it, but that was kind of like my first experience of covering pro. And I covered the Giants through that summer, and then at the end of that summer was when I got an email from the Journal-Inquirer, which was a newspaper in Connecticut, that said, we're not looking for a Giants writer, but we're looking for someone to write a story about the Jets once a week. Is it something you'd be interested in? And I was like, maybe. And then they said, oh, and we're going to pay. I was like, well, that's better than what I'm doing now. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Now, here's Pure Cup. Like, now, money. So I went, that's when I started covering the Jets, was the end of that summer, I think October. The Jets played the Raiders in 2014, and that was my first story. That I wrote a story on like Darren Walls and Antonio Allen, I think. Both those guys, I wrote a story on them for the Journal-Inquirer. That was my first Jet story, and that's kind of what kicked things into high gear for the next year that I was at Monmouth, which is wild.
You had a story we were talking about before the show about how you broke a signing.
Oh yeah,
that was that signing.
Yeah, so that was actually right after this. So,
okay.
so I started at the Journal-Inquirer, and I was basically covering the Giants still for like BBI and some for SB Nation, and then the Journal-Inquirer. So I would go to the Giants for like I would go there bolt out of class. So I had my class schedule. I reorganized the class so everything was in the morning. So I could leave class on certain days at the right time, maybe like 5 minutes early to get to the practice for the Giants practice. So I would do like the Giants 2 days, the Jets 1 day. This company, About.com, then started forming blog sites for all NFL teams. And they were paying, it wasn't like a crazy amount of money, but they were paying certainly more than what the Journal-Inquirer was. And so I said to them, I was like, hey, I'm covering, someone put me in touch with them. And they sent me an email like, would you want to be the Jets guy? Like, would you want to cover the Jets for us? And I said, yeah, like that would be kind of cool. So I basically went from covering Giants, Jets to just Jets. I was writing the blogging daily for the About.com, writing my one big feature a week for the Journal-Inquirer. During this time was when, this is now my full second year at Monmouth, because now I'm doing games on Sundays, all this stuff. Like I'm covering it. This is my full second year.
Okay.
My big thing was that what I always wanted to know, and what I never understood, was sources. Like, how do you get a source? Like, do I have to hope that like my mom's neighbor is like John Mayer's son? Like, how do you get a source? I don't know. And I had a mentor who still to this day is the guy I go to for everything. His name's Jordan Rana, who covers the Giants now for ESPN. At the time, he was with the Ledger. I remember asking him, like, how do you get sources, man? And he gave me the agent list, and a list of all the agents in the NFL. And he goes, you call every one of those guys. Pick a Saturday, pick a Friday, pick a couple days. Go through and just call them, introduce yourself, ask for their cell phone, ask for them, and just start building contacts. And they'll be some of your best sources. So I started doing that. My mom, like at Monmouth, this was March, because free agency was coming up. So this was like probably February-ish. I just started emailing, calling, texting, getting numbers, all that. Some agents were super friendly that I'm still tight with this today. When I go to the NFL Combine, I catch up with them.
Yeah.
Other agents hung up on me right away. They heard Connor Hughes About.com, like, don't know what that is, hang up. But one of the guys was someone who I'm still close with today, who helped me out a lot. And I remember building sources and getting those sources together, and then thinking about, like, I want to get my first break. So in the NFL season, the time for like really good breaks is usually free agency. Is that now it's so, I mean, NFL Network has heavy bigwigs that really are like, their whole thing is breaking news. So it's tougher now, but back then there weren't as many. It was kind of like Schefter and Rappaport, and those were kind of like the two really big guys, and that was it. But I wanted a broken start. I wanted to break some kind of news. And I remember the day before free agency, when everyone's going to sign, I made a big list of like the players I thought the Jets could target. And this is, I'm still in Monmouth. And I started calling those agents. And I had like a bunch of different guys on the list. I knew the Jets secondary was terrible, so I had these guys down at corners, these safeties, these guys. Right. And the one that I always thought was possible was this guy Antonio Cromartie, Pro Bowl corner forever. It was like a big, at the time in 2015 he was a huge free agent.
Yeah.
And I remember picking up the phone to call, his agent. And a couple days before free agency started, and called him. And I was like, hey, got a voicemail. But it was like one of those like like when you don't set up your voicemail. So I was like, I think this is a cell phone. I'll just mark down, I think this is a cell. So I saved it in my phone as a cell. Day free agency opens, that morning I woke up at like 6 a.m. and I just texted him. I was like, hey, was wondering if the Jets are interested in Antonio Cromartie. And he goes, you're the first person to contact me, give me a call. Throughout the next several days of this negotiation, he was super helpful in coming back and forth with me of answering texts, this is where we are, this is where we are. One time he called me up and he goes, this is so crazy. I actually saw him at the Combine the other day, and I told him the story, or last year, and I told him the story. And he calls me up to explain to me why the Jets should be targeting his client instead of someone else. And he was kind of trying to say that while Antonio was older, he's more experienced, which is beneficial. So he was trying to put it in the real world to compare it to me. And he goes, so how old are you? And I think he thought I would say something like, oh, I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, something like that. And he would say like, well, aren't you more experienced than someone like this age? And I was like, oh, I'm 23. And I was like, I'll be honest, man, I'm just trying to get a broken story. And he goes, I like you. He goes, you got it. He goes, when he signs, it's your story. So I remember I go into class, and I don't know if teachers are lax with it now or as intense as they are or were, but you weren't allowed to have phones out in college. Mm-hmm. So I remember going up to a professor, 2 different professors back-to-back times, and telling them in class at Monmouth, I was like, look, I have my phone out. I was like, I know I'm not supposed to, but I think I'm actually going to break an NFL story. I was like, I'm not going to text, but if I get the text from this person, it means the deal's done, and I got to report it because it means I broke the story, and it means I actually have it. And I don't think I slept for like the 3 days. And like I remember in class, I was sitting there in my English class, or some literature class, whatever it was, and I had my phone on my desk, and it lit up, and I saw his name, and I was like, oh no, and I swipe, and all it says is deal done, go. And I tweeted it out, and it was my first ever break. And what I found out was years later.
Did he give you the details on the deal and
everything?
Yeah,
he said he had deal done. So the way that the NFL breaks usually work is that what agents will do is they'll give one person that the deal is done, and they'll give another reporter the financial means. Okay. So his deal was 4 years, $32 million. He gave me the break. He gave Schefter the financial details. That was my first break. I mean, I remember I was 23, so it was like so cool to me to think like I'm in college.
You're in a college classroom
class,
and
breaking it,
right.
And I'm competing because my whole thing was I want to compete with everyone in that media room. I don't want to be the person on the side. I don't want to be the fan, but I want to be someone who is viewed the same as everyone else and be fighting and going toe to toe and doing everything that you guys are doing, because when one of you leaves, I want your job. And years later, or this was 15, so the next 2017 was when the Ledger hired me. I remember in my interview with my boss at the time, Kevin Manahan, he brought up that story and said, he goes, I always wonder, he asked me to tell him how I did it. And I remember him telling me, he goes, like, I always was curious how some kid in college beat my 2 full-time beat writers. He goes, I really was curious how you managed to do that. And I told him, and I got that job. And that was my first final moment of you made it. Like, now it's time to breathe. But yeah, that was wild. I know I actually went back to Monmouth for a career day a couple months ago, last year, something like that, right around there. And I remember talking to a professor, and he came out to me, he goes, I still remember you. He goes, to this day, I tell kids in class, he goes, people ask about having their phones out. And he goes, I have a no phone policy. He goes, I have one exception to a phone policy. He goes, if you're going to break a story, you can have your phone out. He goes, it's the Connor Hughes rule. I was like, I know. I was like, I don't know how. I was like, I don't know, man, how long you're going to teach, but if that's a rule at Monmouth, I'm good. I'm good. If that's in his class, I'm good. I'm happy with it, yeah.
That's terrific. So now you're with The Athletic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you started there when?
I graduated Monmouth in 2015. When I graduated Monmouth, I was working at the Journal-Inquirer still, and I had moved over from About.com to the USA Today Sports Media Group. The Ledger hired me in 2016, so I worked for the Ledger from 2016 through the 2016 and 2017 seasons I covered for the Ledger, and then after the 2017 season was when The Athletic was forming, and they had reached out to me and said, we've been monitoring you for a while. We're interested. You want to talk about what we're interested? We kind of want to talk to you about what we're about at The Athletic. Talk to them. They painted a picture of a situation that I didn't believe existed anymore, because in journalism today, so much is page views and clicks and all that, and you're writing for page views and you're writing for clicks.
Sure.
And The Athletic was what the Ledger was, and it was great. You can write features, but make sure you get your page views and make sure you get your clicks, and you have to do this because what channel put all this stuff.
Right.
And it just drove me nuts because it wasn't what I liked about the field, but everything else I was doing at the Ledger I did like. So what The Athletic pitched was, no, we're stories. We want you to tell a story. We don't care about page views. We believe that if you write a nice story, people will subscribe to read it. And they pitched it to me. They made an offer, and I was like, let's roll. I can't turn this down. This opportunity, this is all what I've been dreaming about. So I started with them in 2000, and after the 2017 season, so 18 was my first year. Sam Darnold's rookie year was my first year on the beat for The Athletic, and I've been there 18, 19, and now this will be my 3rd year with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're covering the Jets full-time?
Yeah, I covered it. So I'm a full-time. I started covering the Jets full-time for the Ledger, and 16 was when they hired me, and then The Athletic hired me for the same role. So I cover the Jets full-time. I'm their beat. I think my title is staff writer, but I'm a beat writer. So I cover the beat of the Jets. And I cover that in the NFL events. So I'm at every game, every practice, every home game, road game.
Are you still one of the youngest guys in the room when you're talking to the players and covering them?
Yeah, I was hired full-time by the Jets. When I was hired full-time on the Jets beat, I was 24. And I was the youngest in the room by like 10 years. 3 years later, actually when I left the Ledger, the guy that they hired to replace me was a year younger than I was. I was 27, he was 26, but he just actually left the field. So yeah, right now I'm still the youngest in there by maybe 8 or 9 years. Okay. I'm probably the youngest still on the beat. Most of the guys are in their 30s, mid to late 30s, 40s, something like that, and then even older than that.
You still feel like you're learning stuff?
You learn stuff every day, man, and like that's the cool thing about writing is every day I learn a different way to do something. I have like a list on my phone of words, future words to use, and they're just cool words that I haven't heard before. And every time I write a story, I'll go back and when I self-edit it, I'll try to work 1 or 2 of those words in there at different points just to try to add it to my vocabulary. But no, you're learning, you're adjusting, you're doing different things. I'm learning still how to do sourcing and how to build sources, how to further your relationships with sources, how to approach covering this scene compared to that scene. And I'm fortunate that I have an amazing editor now, Chris Strauss at The Athletic, who is super hands-on, which is what I love. Like the worst advice I can ever get is like, you're great for your age, keep doing what you're doing. I hate that. Like, I don't want to be great judged by my age. I want to be judged by making me better than what I am right now. So that's why I loved Royek, was he tore my stuff apart and built it back up. And Professor Morano, John Morano, who was the same way at Monmouth for me, after class, same thing, tear it apart, build it back up. So you have to teach me how to be better. And the thing about journalism is like I'm constantly, like, every situation I'm in, whether it's a combine, this game, that's what you're doing. You are learning so much every single day. And to, like, what's weird is like I'll read a story I wrote last month and I'll hate it because things that I know now, I thought that was like Pulitzer worthy like 2 months ago. Like this is the best thing I've ever written. 2 months from now, if I go back and look at it, I would change 100 things because the stuff I know now, words I would change this. This is too wordy. Get rid of this. So a lot of times after I write my story, I'll kind of leave it because I'll just drive myself mad trying to adjust things. I'll leave it be, but no, you're constantly learning and all different things, and it's every day something new, and that's why you lean on your mentors. Like I'll lean on Jordan Raanan, who helped me so much early in my career. I'll still go to him for advice and questions on breaking news and how to do this and how to approach that. You're constantly adjusting and changing, and I think that if you ever stop, you won't be in the field for long because this field is one that they can cut you off pretty quick, and you see the layoffs that are in journalism now, you see all that, so there are things that you need to do to make sure you stay around, and one of that way is keep getting better and keep grinding.
Now, you're writing every day. You're not doing play-by-play, but you are doing some TV work as well. So tell us about that.
So that's a cool, like when I made the pivot to go to journalism and fell in love with it, I was always, the way that I always thought about it was like, well, journalism can always come back. Or broadcasting can always come back, I should say, because I kind of felt, I didn't fall out of love with play-by-play, but I liked writing more. I remember like sitting down one day and I was covering high school sports for the BCT and doing the Camden River Sharks play-by-play. And I remember like sitting down with my girlfriend at the time, now fiance, and saying, I don't know, I was like, play-by-play was my first love, it's tough to let it go. I was like, because my whole life I kept saying, or my whole life I was 20, like, so in relation. I remember constantly saying like, I kept saying play-by-play, blah-blah-blah, how can I just go somewhere else? I was like, but I'm at the River Sharks doing play-by-play, I'm writing this. I was like, this is like, if you're gonna start with broadcasting, that's kind of where you go minor league and hope you make your way up. I was like, I'm not really having fun doing play-by-play for the River Sharks. It's just not that fun for me. I don't like the whole daily grind. I don't like the baseball this much. Like this isn't fun for me. But I'm going and covering boys swimming and having a blast writing this feature about this kid who just broke this wrestler. It was like, I really love, so I made that decision. But I always kind of thought in the back of my head that somehow, some way broadcasting would come back. And it did when I was at the Ledger, when I got contacted by somebody at CBS New York. And they said like, hey, we're looking for, you had been someone we know who used to do our local spots every Saturday for to come on to talk about the Jets for 5-10 minutes. He can't do it anymore. He recommended you to replace him. And I was like, wow, really? I was like, so this is kind of cool. I remember I was like, I'm going to be on like New York television. It was like the first time I'd done TV in forever. I remember actually texting DJ Deaney, who works here. And we were texting me like, dude, I'm about to be on New York television. And like I had not done broadcasting aside from radio. Like I did radio and if you're a reporter, you get contacted by radio stations every day to do like a 5-minute hit on the Jets to talk about this, to talk about the NFL. Like you do radio hits all the time, but I hadn't done television in a while, really since here. Because at BCC, they didn't have a TV station, they had radio, so I did radio. Monmouth, I was working already, so I didn't get a chance to be involved in their television station. So I hadn't been on TV since LDTV, and now I was going to be on New York TV. So I was a little nervous, but I started doing that with...
It's quite a jump.
Yeah. I was like, oh wow, like all right. I remember, but it's the crazy thing was like actually this is the wild thing was getting there and looking at the equipment they have. I mean, like I remember that. Like I remember we had one of them.
I probably know how to use that.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. Now when I got to SNY is when like all their cameras are like on basically robots, so they move themselves.
Yeah.
That was new. Like that, I was like, we didn't have that at Seneca. That's something we did not have, but we had everything else. But I remember like doing. The CBS had contacted me and said like we want to bring you on, and I started doing CBS hits for them on Saturdays. Did those hits throughout the 2016 season. That off season and that summer, SNY, which is for people in Philly, it's like their Comcast Sportsnet. They're owned by they're owned by NBC. So SNY had contacted me and said, hey, we liked you. We're doing a documentary on the Jets. We'd like to have you on as like one of the talking heads for it. And I said, cool, sounds good. Like, awesome, let's do it. New TV station, new something else. Like, now I was falling in love with broadcasting again. And so I was like, yeah, more TV, let's do it. And I did that. I remember the woman at the time who was in charge of talent acquisition sent me an email afterwards and said, hey, you mind coming into the office? I was like, sure, like, you mean you're doing it? She goes, well, dress nice. I was like, that's weird, but sure, like, let's do it.
Okay.
So I wore like my suit, walked in, and I met with her. I met with like a couple other people. I met with like the vice president of the company or something like that, and like a bunch of the people that work there. And then I left, and she contacted me a couple of days. She goes, we'd like to hire you. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, what? I was like, do I like leave? I was like, I can't leave the Ledger. I was like, I'm working at the Ledger. She goes, no. She goes, we want to hire you as an NFL analyst in addition to that. She goes, so like before like CBS, you just go on television. It's not a paid spot. She goes, we want to hire you, so when you come on television for us, we're going to pay you, and you're going to be our NFL analyst. So we're going to bring you in as Connor Hughes from the Star Ledger. You'll have the Star Ledger underneath on your lower third. We're going to identify you, so your current, it's basically free promotion for the Ledger. So they're like, we're down with it.
Yeah.
But we're going to bring you on, and that's when I started working for SNY, and I started as their just doing like side-by-side hits, like interview pieces at practice. It went from that to come into the studio during the season. I do studio hits every Saturday. I do on location. I do solo hits. And this year was actually the first year that I co-hosted my first shows. So I co-hosted a debate show called Loudmouths, which was so weird and so cool. Because the cool thing is, like, I've been so football-oriented since 2014 when I started covering the Jets. Now I'm debating the Mets, and I'm debating the Yankees, I'm debating the Knicks. I was like, this is crazy. And I did a show called The Thread where I co-hosted it as well. And, like, the most amazing, cool thing that I'm so fortunate about with my career is that I fell in love with broadcasting way back when. Went the writing route, but then broadcasting came back together, and now they're together. Yeah. Now it's not, I don't have to pick. I do my writing, which I'm so in love with, and I do the broadcasting, which I'm so in love with, and they both work together that it's, like when I break a story, SNY brings me on to talk, and NBC, I've been on NBC New York with Bruce Beck, which was crazy and wild, and like my aunt, I remember called me and told me, she's like, I was flipping through the TV, I just saw you. She goes, it's so weird. It's like, it's like a pinch yourself moment every time I think about what I do and what I'm fortunate enough to do, and that, you know, I made a decision to pick writing way back when, but the fact that broadcasting came right back to it, and it's back on TV again, just like I was at LDTV and GETV, it's, like, it's so neat to me, and I love every second. I wouldn't change any of it for the world. I love it.
That's great. Well, you've worked hard for it.
Yeah, it's been crazy, but it's been a wild journey, but it's been a fun one.
And people recognize you on the street sometimes too, right?
That is the weirdest thing, and like it's happened when I go out in New York. You don't expect it, but it's almost like, well, this is a Jets pop. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on social media, and there's, you know, your Twitter following grows pretty substantially when you cover an NFL team. So these fans are out there. There's a lot of them. I mean, you're on TV frequently. Like, there's millions of people that are seeing you there. Like, they recognize your face. So when you're around a place where you think there are Jet fans, you're kind of like, okay, like a Jet fan who is a diehard Jet fan that's on social media that follows the Jets writers, he'll know who you are. He'll say hi. So like, I've been at Jets event. That's not really that surprising. You know, there are Jet fans there and Jet fans there. Like when you walk out at training camp practice, they put the bleachers right behind where the media are, and people are screaming your name. Like, it's weird and it's funny, but it's like, yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm not a player. Like, one kid asked for my autograph, and I was like, dude, you don't want my autograph. Like, that's worth nothing. Like, the ball net was worth less with that on there. But the weirdest one was I was playing golf with my dad, and we were on a course in Central Jersey. So like, if I'm in Central Jersey, South Jersey, like, there's very few Jet fans here. So someone had hit a ball into like where I was. So I was like, he hit near where I was. So I just marked it while he drove over to pick it up. And I was like, oh, hey man, here's your ball, I got it. He drove away. So he kind of like looked at me when he came up, and he was like, gave me like a look, and I was like, it's weird, stink eye man, like, I don't know you. Yeah. But he picks it up and like puts it in his pocket and like drives away. I hit my shot. 2 minutes later, he goes, excuse me. I was like, what's up, man? I was like, I forget like the ball. Did you get a hit another one? He goes, are you Connor? And I looked, I was like, are you from high school? Are you from, I was like, yeah. He goes, Hughes? I was like, yeah. He goes, the Jets guy? I was like, oh man. He goes, I've been following you since about.com. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, dude, I shook his hand. I was like, thanks for reading, man. I appreciate it. But that was where like 2 people recognized me at my gym. Like they came up to like, dude, we've been looking at you coming to the gym for the last 3 weeks, and we kept like bringing up your Twitter and saying like, is that him? Or like, why are you in Princeton? And I was like, oh, my fiance works at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I was like, this is our middle point, so I live here. He goes, oh my God. So he talks to me about the Jets anytime I come in. I mean,
that's funny.
It's surreal. That's like the super surreal part is like when that happens. Or
not something you expected to be part of.
No, especially like, you don't expect it. It's so cool and it's fun, but it's definitely weird. Every time it happens, it can happen 300 times for the next 30 years. It could happen 1 time for the next 30 years. It doesn't matter. Like every time it happens, it's like, that's weird. It's cool, but it's weird. I love it. I love it though. It's fun. It's fun.
So what's your biggest moment been of your career so far?
I think anytime you break a story is the rush of like the immediate, like because it's, holy cow, I just got something no one else has. Not the big wigs on the cover nationally, not the people I compete with daily. Anytime you break a story is like the immediate adrenaline rush, but then it also fades and you get nervous of, was I lied to? Are my sources lying to me?
Right.
And then it drives me nuts. I'm not a huge fan, but it's fun. Like when you get one that's right, and I haven't had one that's wrong yet, so it's like, it's the rush, but it's also like nervous, so it's fun. But I think the 2 coolest moments in my career were just 2 stories I wrote. And one was on Darren Lee, the ex-Jets linebacker, now plays for the Chiefs, won the Super Bowl. His relationship with Gio, the 6-year-old kid who had cancer. That one was big. One of my favorite moments of my career because I spent the whole day with Gio's family. So they lived in upstate New York, so I drove the 4 or whatever hours away, got there in the morning, went to Gio's T-ball game, and he kind of has like a degenerative disease too in his bones where like he's playing T-ball now, but this is like the last year he can play. He's such a huge sports fan. Like just seeing him play, seeing how you're talking to him, spending that moment. Then we went back to his parents' house, and like I talked to his mom, and that's when we did the full interview of what happened, and like writing that story and telling that story and getting the feedback from people on how that emotionally made them feel. That was one of my favorite stories of my career and thus moments of my career. And the other one was actually a high school story I wrote. It was on this kid, Peter Butkus, when I was writing high school sports for the Star-Ledger. And I think the crazy thing about it was that at the time I was covering Morris County basketball, was my beat in the winter. And I had interviewed and talked to this kid, Peter Butkus, who was the center on Mendham, who was a pretty good basketball team in Morris County. I had talked to him 4 or 5 times after games. Like he was one of my go-to quotes because he was always succinct in what he said, but he always gave you good quotes, and he was just a good guy. He was great for copy. He was great for game copy. And last 2 weeks of the season, I got a call from his coach, and he called me. He goes, "Hey, Connor." I was like, "Hey, what's up, coach?" Like, "What's up, man?" And he goes, "Wanted to say to you, I have a story I kind of want you to write." He goes, "It's about Peter." I was like, "Butkus?" He goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, what's up? Like, how's he doing? You go to college, you pick a college, something like that." Because most times they just want to write you a kid's going to college. He goes, "No, Connor, Peter's blind." I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" He goes, I forget the exact the illness that he had, but basically it was as if like if you took binoculars and you flipped them around and you look at it, it's like looking through pee holes that are a million miles away. That's what his eyesight was. And he goes, "You've been great to us. You've been great." He goes, "I want you to write the story." He goes, "Peter's never wanted the extra attention because he's graduating now. I want you to tell the story because maybe it'll help someone else who's dealing with it." And I remember writing that story, talking to Peter, talking to his mom, his dad, his doctor, and listening to like how he did it. And like I remember his coach told me, he goes, "I didn't know." He goes, "Because Peter didn't. He came out to tryouts like anyone else. He didn't tell." I was like, kid shot like 90% from the free throw line because it was all just rhythm. He just knew that this will go. If I'm here, this will go in. So he could look down, see where his feet were on the free throw line, know if he does this, it goes in. And it was just, I remember writing that story and being like, wow. And I got an email from my editor later that day. He goes, "My sister lives in like Minnesota or something like that." She goes, she gets the copy though because she reads the local thing. She goes, she wants to read about who we're covering. She goes, she read your story and was crying. I was like, that's it, man. Like when you write a story and you can do that about that and give the kid the light, like that was it. So like of all the things I've done, like breaking stories is fun, but those 2 stories I wrote were like the 2 best moments, my 2 favorite moments of my career so far.
Very satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely.
What goals do you have moving forward? Anything that you really want to accomplish or anything you want to get to? Or?
I think like the crazy thing now is like I'm 28, I just turned 28. So I'm 28 now. You kind of gotta, I want to do what I'm doing now is for a bit. Like this, I'm very content, I'm very happy, I love doing the TV, I want to stick with it. When I get a few years down the road, that's when I have to talk to my people I'm close with and say like, what do we want to do now? Do we want to go national route? So do I want to go from covering the Jets to covering a region, covering an area, covering a league? Do I want to go insider route where all you do is break stories? Or are you happy doing what you're doing? Do you want to go to a different outlet? Do you want to try NFL Network, ESPN? Like, what do you want to do? Like, and I think that's something where a few years down the line, I have to build some more sources. I have my guys that I'm really close, but you got to increase the Rolodex. You got to do things like that before you even consider making another substantial jump. But where I am now is kind of where I want to be. If I did this for the rest of my life, I would die a happy man. Like I said, man, my job is I watch football and then I write and I talk about it. Like that's how I pay my bills, my car. That's what I do for a living. Like that's for me. If you would have told me that when I was here in this studio 10 years ago, I would have said, like, where the heck do I sign up? Like that's what I want. Like that sounds sick, man.
Yeah.
And so I pinch it because this is what I want to do. So I'm content and I love it. And now it's just a matter of in 4 years, 5 years, if it's like, okay, do you want to go? Do you want to stay here and just keep doing this? This is where or do you want to go more national route instead of, I don't know. Like right now, I like the idea that I know everything about the Jets and I know everything about. So like I am locked. This is my beat.
Yeah.
When you can do that with a team. When you go to a league, you kind of know a little bit about a lot instead of a lot about a little. So you kind of got to figure out what you want to do. So it's a discussion for another time. But right now, I'm thrilled doing what I'm doing. Like this is it. Like it's a dream. It's a dream.
Well, it's great that you have that perspective and and there's so many different options in your field and all the things that you're able to do. So the door is definitely open in the future
that's like
whatever,
I said, man.
whatever kind of thing that you decide you might want to go into.
Exactly, and what's cool is that it is everything. It's like I said, I write, but I also broadcast. I'm on the radio all the time doing radio hits. I have a podcast that we do for The Athletic. I'm on TV. So there's the cool thing about the job is I'm never getting bored because I'm always doing something else, and you're going somewhere else, and you're trying something. You never get bored. It's always fun. There's always something else you're doing. And I think that's one of the things I really do love about this field is that you're not pigeonholed into one thing. But also, if you're going into this field, you can't be, because if you're a one-trick pony and you do one thing, you're not going to last. Yeah. You got to do it all. You got to be able to be on TV, and you got to be able to do broadcasting. You got to be able to podcast. You got to write. You got to write comms, features, and you got to break news. So it's like everything you got to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. It's and you're going to be one of the people that when time come for cuts, you're the one who's going to get cuts, like a sports team.
There's going to be somebody else like you were. That's going to go out there and get it and do it if you're not going to do it. So
exactly.
And maybe one day you get to cover the Jets in the Super Bowl.
I don't know. We're not. Hold on. I'm holding my breath on that one. I'm telling you, that's been my dream is to cover. That's the one thing on the dream list that I still got to do is cover a Super Bowl.
Let's talk about your family before we wrap up. You mentioned you're engaged to your fiance, and she's a Cherokee graduate. From 2010 also. How did you
2011.
Guys,
so she was 1 year behind me. Yeah, close enough.
How did you guys meet?
My first job actually at Brewster's Ice Cream, Nathan Hot Dog. So actually the crazy, I don't know her if I don't go to Seneca, because I remember my dad and mom were on me about getting a job, and obviously you need a job when you're a kid. And so my chemistry class, like Miss Brzezinski, I think was my teacher, she had held out like a flyer of like this new ice cream place that was opening. And I was like, oh, sweet, like that sounds like a fun job. Like, if I got to work, let's make it fun.
Yeah.
And just actually isn't much different than what I'm doing now. But I applied for it and I got the job. And at my first day, I met Bree. And I remember we met. I was 17 at the time, but we started dating then. And she went to my prom. I went to her prom. And then this year was when we got engaged. So we dated. We've been dating for about 10 years now.
So you two, you're living just outside of Princeton, Lawrence.
Yeah, because
right?
she's a nurse at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in the NICU. Okay. So it's kind of the middle point for us. So I got to get to Florham Park where the Jets are. She has to get there. So it's not an ideal commute for either of us, but we make it work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your dog, Lucy.
That's the baby.
You're quote big fan of.
Oh, I am. Yeah, that's my pup. We adopted Lucy. I think my mom I don't want to wait a Monmouth. I think it was when I adopted Lucy. I think my mom just had me adopt her so that I had a reason to come home. And it worked because I was home all the time to see the dog. And then when I moved to Morristown, before Bree and I moved in together, Lucy came with me, and she's crazy. She's a mutt. She's wild. We call her Lucifer because at times she's the devil. But we love her. That's our Lucy. Yeah, she was there when we got engaged. Lucy was there and involved in that too.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And when you have some free time, you like traveling and golfing?
Yeah. Bree and I have been to a couple places. Went to Hawaii last year, which was super fun. The cool thing about my schedule too is that with the Jets, you travel, right? So wherever the Jets are on the road, I'm there. Yeah. So my flight's covered. My flight's covered. 2 nights at the hotel is covered. So what Bree will do is usually pick a pick a trip and come with me. So she's been to Nashville when the Jets played the Titans, New Orleans when they played the Saints. This year she's going to go to LA because they got a couple trips against the Chargers. I think they're playing. So yeah, we travel, and I love golfing too. That's a new hobby I picked up. Not good, but it's one of those where it sucked me in.
It takes a while to get there.
Yeah, it does, and it's frustrating as all. I still don't know why I like it, but every time it takes one shot and you're good. But yeah, it's fun.
Great. Well, Connor, it's been great catching up with you and
absolutely.
having you
It's
here.
great to be back.
And we wish you congratulations on all your success and
Thank you, man. I
best of
appreciate
luck
it.
in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me back. I love it.
Yep, anytime.
Love it.
And that will do it for this episode of Where Are They Now? For more Lenape District alumni interviews, check us out on youtube.com/Lenape District TV. We'll see you next time.